Tensions between the U.S. and China in the South China Sea have persisted through years of maritime and aerial confrontations. U.S. freedom of navigation operations often spark disputes, while China counters with aggressive tactics like deploying fighter jets and naval vessels in close proximity. An intercept of a U.S. warship by a heavily armed Chinese fighter jet in 2025 pushed the region to the brink, triggering a chain of events that shook the global order. Below is the account of this conflict, from an aerial intercept to its far-reaching global consequences. On an August morning in 2025, over the South China Sea near Scarborough Shoal, a Chinese J-20 fighter jet loaded with anti-ship missiles closed in on the USS Dewey, an Arleigh Burke-class U.S. destroyer equipped with advanced radar and guided missiles. The Dewey was conducting a freedom of navigation operation to assert international rights in the disputed region. The J-20 broadcast warnings, demanding the U.S. ship depart, echoing Beijing's sovereignty claims. But the USS Dewey held its course, radar locked on target, the atmosphere charged. Suddenly, the J-20 swooped low, mere hundreds of meters from the ship, rattling its deck. The waters around Scarborough Shoal became a powder keg, ready to ignite.
The intercept turned aggressive as the J-20 dropped flares near the USS Dewey, disrupting the ship's radar systems. A miscalculation led to a dangerous act. The J-20 fired a warning missile that skimmed past the ship, triggering a small explosion on the water's surface. Alarms blared on the Dewey, smoke rising from the waves. The U.S. ship activated its close-in defense systems, shooting down an anti-ship drone launched by China in response. Nearby Chinese naval vessels moved to encircle the Dewey, while the U.S. deployed F-35 jets from a carrier in the South China Sea. Missiles streaked across the sky, transforming the Scarborough Shoal area into a blazing battlefield, with black smoke and explosions spreading wide.
The conflict spilled into cyberspace and outer space. Viruses targeted the USS Dewey's control systems, disrupting communication with the U.S. fleet. The U.S. countered by crippling radar at Chinese bases on artificial islands in the South China Sea. In space, Chinese and U.S. military satellites clashed in digital attacks, disrupting global positioning systems. Fighter jets from both sides battled over the South China Sea, with hypersonic missiles slicing through clouds. The Dewey's Aegis defense system intercepted most Chinese missiles, but debris from the explosions rained into the sea. The war expanded as U.S. allies joined with patrol boats, turning Scarborough Shoal into a multinational flashpoint, where sky and sea.
The conflict escalated beyond control when China launched a massive cyber attack, paralyzing financial systems and power grids in major U.S. cities. The U.S. retaliated by destroying Chinese cyber command centers in Shanghai and Guangzhou using advanced AI viruses. These attacks disrupted global supply chains, causing panic in commercial hubs. U.S. naval bases in the Pacific faced Chinese ballistic missile strikes, while the U.S. deployed additional carriers to the South China Sea. The global economy reeled as maritime trade routes stalled, and satellite imagery showed cities plunged into darkness, marking an unprecedented phase of warfare. The aftermath of the cyber attacks triggered a global trade crisis. Disrupted supply chains paralyzed major ports, from Shanghai to Los Angeles, leading to shortages of goods and raw materials. Nations reliant on trade scrambled to negotiate emergency alliances to restore shipping. Autonomous robot teams were deployed to repair cyber infrastructure, while international relief ships delivered essential goods to affected regions. The U.S. and China, recognizing the cost of the conflict, paused military actions to focus on economic recovery. But the battlefield remained littered with wreckage, with cybercriminal groups exploiting the chaos to rise. The crisis temporarily curbed the war, but new tensions and lingering trade threats signaled an unstable future.
Tensions in the South China Sea have simmered for years, with confrontations between U.S. and Chinese warships heating up the region. U.S. freedom of navigation operations frequently spark disputes, while China reinforces its sovereignty claims with provocative actions like water cannons and sonar pings. A collision between a Chinese destroyer and a U.S. naval ship near Haivan Island in 2025 pushed the region to the brink, triggering a chain of events that altered the global balance of power. Below is the account of this conflict, from a minor maritime misstep to its catastrophic global consequences.
On a stormy August morning in 2025, the waters around Hainan Island in the South China Sea boiled with tension. A Chinese destroyer shadowed the USS Higgins, an Arleigh Burke-class U.S. destroyer equipped with advanced radar and cruise missiles, during a freedom of navigation operation to assert international rights in the disputed region. The Chinese ship broadcast warnings, demanding the USS Higgins depart, echoing Beijing's sovereignty claims. But the U.S. ship held its course, radars locked on target, the atmosphere electric. Suddenly, the Chinese destroyer veered dangerously close, forcing the Higgins to maneuver evasively. The seas around Hainan Island became a powder keg, poised to ignite.
The challenge turned aggressive as the Chinese ship deployed water cannons and sonar pings to disrupt the USS Higgins systems. A miscalculation led to a collision. The Chinese destroyer scraped the Higgins hull, sparking fires on both vessels. Alarms blared and smoke rose over the waves. The Higgins fired warning flares, but China mistook this as hostility, launching anti-ship drones. The U.S. ship activated its close-in defense systems, downing several drones, but surviving missiles shook the sea. The turbulent waters bore witness to relentless explosions, transforming the area around Hainan Island into a blazing battlefield.
The conflict spilled into cyberspace and the skies. Viruses targeted the USS Higgins navigation systems, while U.S. countermeasures disrupted the Chinese fleet's radar. In the air, fighter jets from a nearby U.S. carrier clashed with Chinese aircraft in fierce dogfights. Hypersonic missiles streaked toward the Higgins, but its advanced defense systems intercepted most, debris raining into the sea. The war expanded as Allied forces from a neighboring nation joined with patrol boats, turning Hainan Island into a multinational flashpoint where explosions and black smoke shrouded the sky. The conflict escalated beyond control when China launched ballistic missiles at U.S. military bases in the Pacific. U.S. retaliated with a strike targeting 3 covert Chinese nuclear bases in the mainland interior. Stealth cruise missiles launched from U.S. submarines obliterated its facilities, shaking the regional balance of power. Smoke and radioactive dust rose from the destroyed bases, sowing panic in nearby cities. China's allies responded with attacks on U.S. bases in Japan and South Korea, while U.S. carriers deployed defensive formations in the South China Sea. The global economy reeled as maritime trade routes halted, and satellite imagery revealed vast regions engulfed in smoke and dust. The nuclear strike unleashed catastrophic consequences. Radioactive dust from the destroyed bases spread, contaminating water sources and farmland across East Asia. An environmental crisis erupted, forcing neighboring nations to collaborate urgently to contain the disaster. Autonomous robot teams were deployed to clean up radiation, while international relief ships delivered medical supplies and food to affected areas. The U.S. and China, recognizing the cost of the conflict, paused military actions to focus on relief efforts. Yet the battlefield remained littered with debris and wreckage, with insurgent groups exploiting the chaos to rise. The crisis temporarily halted the war, but lingering tensions and the enduring environmental threat signaled an unstable future.
On a stormy August morning in 2025, the waters around Hainan Island in the South China Sea simmered with tension. A Chinese Navy destroyer shadowed a U.S. Coast Guard ship during a routine Freedom of Navigation operation, FONOP, to assert international rights in the disputed region. The Chinese vessel broadcast warnings demanding the U.S. ship depart, echoing real-world claims of sovereignty. But the U.S. ship, equipped with advanced radar and anti-ship missiles, held its course, radars locked on target. The atmosphere grew electric, and suddenly the Chinese destroyer veered dangerously close, forcing the U.S. ship to maneuver evasively, a tactic seen in real confrontations. The seas around Hainan Island became a powder keg, poised to explode. The challenge turned aggressive as the Chinese ship deployed water cannons and sonar pings to disrupt the U.S. Coast Guard ship's systems, mirroring provocative tactics recorded in real incidents. In a fictional miscalculation, the ships collided. The Chinese destroyer's bow scraped the U.S. vessel's hull, sparking fires on both. Alarms blared and smoke rose over the waves. The U.S. ship fired warning flares, but the Chinese side mistook this as hostility, launching anti-ship drones. The U.S. vessel activated its close-in weapon system, downing several drones, but surviving missiles shook the sea. The turbulent waters bore witness to relentless explosions, transforming the area around Hainan Island into a blazing battlefield.
As communications jammed, a tactic reminiscent of real cyber attacks attributed to regional powers, the conflict spilled into cyberspace. Hypothetical AI viruses targeted the U.S. ships' navigation systems, while U.S. countermeasures disrupted the Chinese fleet's radar. In the skies, fighter jets from a nearby U.S. carrier clashed with Chinese aircraft in fierce dogfights, inspired by real tense encounters in the South China Sea. Hypersonic missiles streaked toward the U.S. Coast Guard ship, but its advanced defense system intercepted most, debris raining into the sea. Allied forces from a neighboring nation joined with patrol boats, turning Haivan Island into a multinational flashpoint, where explosions and black smoke shrouded the sky.
The initial mistake ignited a regional firestorm. Chinese carriers advanced, reflecting the real militarization of artificial islands, while U.S. strike groups converged from the Pacific. Submarines prowled beneath, launching torpedoes in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Islands near Haivan became launch pads for ground-based missiles, shaking the region. Maritime trade halted, economies reeled, and international outrage surged as satellite footage captured the devastation. The U.S. Coast Guard ship, though damaged, sank the Chinese destroyer with a barrage of anti-ship missiles. But the victory was costly, with heavy losses on both sides.
As the conflict threatened to engulf the region, an unexpected diplomatic breakthrough emerged. A neutral Asian nation convened an emergency summit on a peace ship anchored off Haivan Island. Recognizing the cost of destruction, the warring sides agreed to pause hostilities for talks. Warships withdrew, making way for relief vessels carrying food and medicine to nearby ports. Underwater patrol robots monitored the seas, thwarting sabotage attempts by rogue factions. Though a tentative peace held, the South China Sea remained volatile, littered with sunken wrecks and disrupted trade routes. Covert cyber attacks persisted, signaling unresolved tensions. The initial mistake at Haivan Island left a stark lesson. A single collision could push the region to the brink of catastrophe.